Amen. Shoot, Bobby B, you're not stealing my time. I'm stealing your time being up here for the next few minutes. Welcome, gentlemen. As you may recall, we are talking about going through where Jesus talked about being the way, the truth, and the life. And last week we had talked about the way and that path that following Jesus and what that looks like. It's really kind of funny. Earlier in the week, a couple days ago, I got a text from Tom Gansfried, and he said, as many of you know, he's a regular practice attendee, lived here in town in Phoenix, recently moved up to Colorado, and he shot me a note with a picture of a plaque. He was at the Colorado River. He's like, I'm drinking out of the Colorado River. And I was like, dude, be careful, because you remember, the bit last week that I did comparing our walk with that old game, the Oregon Trail, where you'd end up with dysentery. That's right. Y'all remember? That's good. Dysentery, and how that equates to our spiritual life. And he's like, man, I'm going to drink from the Colorado River. It's like, hold on, man, don't do it. But I thought that was he said something like hashtag dysentery or something like that's some funny stuff right there. So. Anyway, so we're going to get into a tough one today. Holy cow, what do I have? Looks like we've got, it's pretty funny. As I was thinking about things this morning and preparing for my talk, I'm like, philosophers, great thinkers through all of eternity over the last, tens of centuries have been thinking about what they need to do to debate truth. And I'm like, okay, I've got 35 minutes. So we're going to do everything that we can because, spoiler alert, gentlemen, we've got access to the truth in Jesus. Am I right? All right, so let's move forward a little bit. As you may recall, these are our core verses. These are that we're going to be digging through this the last couple weeks. This is where Jesus is talking to the disciples, and he says, "Do not let your hearts be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. My Father's house has many rooms. If that were not so, if that were not true, I would have told you that I'm going there. What I've told you that I'm going there to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me, so you may also be where I am. You know the way to the place where I'm going." Thomas said to him, "Lord, we don't know where you're going, so how will we know the way?" And Jesus said, "I am the way, I am the truth, and I am the life." So let's talk a little bit about why it's important to talk about the truth. And let's examine this. There's recently been a study that was done by the Arizona Christian University, their Cultural Research Center, and really interesting study about where people identify the core tenets of truth and where those come from. What's the basis of truth? They asked everybody in America. 42% of Americans said that God is the basis of truth. I don't know, when I first read the study, I was kind of like, dang, 42%, and that's a sampling of all America. I was a little surprised on the positive side for that. Next piece, inner certainty. Look inside yourself for the truth, man. 16%, 15% scientific proof, 5% traditional, not exactly sure what that is, maybe just kind of, over time, traditional thought. This one killed me right here. I'm glad it's only 4%, but I'm really shocked that it really should be 0. Public consensus. Whatever the public says is right, dude, man, that's the truth. I was like, whoo-wee. Goodness. I mean, that's bad news for girls, right? If you put 5 guys and 1 girl in a room and it's public consensus on what's truth, what's legal, and what's moral and what's not, that could be some bad news. The 5% said there's no such thing as truth, and I love always the cop-outs, the 13%, none of the above. But there was one thing that really troubled me. While I was pretty fired up about the 42%, what I thought was really interesting about this study and really kind of took my breath away was that of Christians, 54% of Christians said that God was the basis of truth. And I'm like, man, we've got a long way to go, and we better start talking about the truth and make sure that we know what the heck is going on out there. So So as we talk about the truth, gentlemen, I want to talk a little bit about first what the truth is not. We have to be real careful here with this particular topic because I want to make sure that there's no confusion. The truth is not information. I think that that's easy to get conflated and confused. But, we live in a world today where we've got more access to more information quicker than any time in history. And how many of you know that we're in trouble? So information is not truth. Feelings are not truth. Now, opinions and observations, those aren't truth either. Now, you're entitled to all of those. And I'm not saying that those are necessarily bad, but let's not conflate them with the truth. Only God is omniscient, knows everything, and is available to us as a source of truth. We talk about feelings as a source of truth. I mean, shoot, there's a lot of conversations that I've had with my wife, and God bless her. And this has gone both ways, where it's like, well, I know, and I feel like you're thinking this. And I know for a fact, because I'm me, that I'm not feeling the way that she's thinking I'm feeling. So we got to make sure that we don't conflate our feelings with truth. The truth is also not casual, meaning this. The same thing with information, how prevalent information is in society. The Bible is the best-selling book in the world. And how many of you know, like with information, that we are in trouble still, even though that Bible is the best-selling book in the world? We can't take this casually. The truth is not casual. The truth, ladies and gentlemen, is Jesus, as you full well know. So let's pick that apart and examine that a little bit. Why do we know that Jesus is the truth? John 1 through 3. In the beginning was the Word. The logos is the Greek word for word, the word for word in this particular passage. And the Word was with God. The Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him, all things were made. Without him, nothing was made. Now, when we talk about that Greek word logos, that actually is the documented, written, established word truth of God that we're talking about within those verses. In Hebrews 4:12, it says, for the word, that logos of God, is alive and active, sharper than any double-edged sword. It penetrates even to dividing soul and spirit, joints and marrow. It judges the thoughts and attitudes of the heart. The truth is really, gentlemen, about our hearts and our heart's alignment with Jesus. Nothing in all creation is hidden from God's sight. Everything is uncovered and laid bare before the eyes of him to whom we must give account. Jesus is the truth because he knows all. This is, I think, what's really important as we start talking about things, as we start looking at, I could stand up here and for the next 30 minutes, I could point my finger to everything that's wrong and untrue in the world. Truth be known, I'd probably rather do that because I could go on and on about that. But what Jesus is most concerned about is this, is he's concerned about our thoughts about him. In this particular conversation, when Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, what's the world saying about me? Who does the world say that I am? And they replied, some say you're John the Baptist, some say you're Elijah, some say you're Jeremiah or one of the other prophets. But what does he boil it down to? He says, who do you say that I am? And that's what this is all about, gentlemen. It's about who you, not what the world says Jesus is, not what the world thinks Jesus is, but who you think Jesus is. And in this mark this date in your calendars, ladies and gentlemen, because not this date, but this date up here, whatever date that was, because Peter, who suffers from chronic foot and mouth disease like I do, he actually got this one right. He says, you're the Messiah, the Son of the living God. And then the verse right after this that Jesus says, oh yeah, you got that from God. You got that from the Spirit. And one of the rare times that Peter got it right, because, 2 days later, Jesus was like telling him, "Get behind me, Satan." So good on Peter for that one. So let's talk about this. When you go to the jewelry store and you're picking out diamonds, how many have ever done that? All right. Yeah, it's for those of you that haven't, it's good on you, man. But what they'll do is they won't just take like the diamond out of the case and put it in your hand or anything like that. But what they do is they actually put it on a black piece of velvet or something so that you can kind of look at it and all of that. And what that's called is a foil, because to actually see the brilliance of the diamond, you have to have something to balance that off against. And that's a little bit of what we're going to do here today, is we're actually going to talk about, as we unpack the truth, we're going to talk about lies. And we're going to talk about lies of the world. The first lie of the world that they like to tell us: follow your heart to find fulfillment. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is not the right way to go. That is not the right place to find the truth. But mark this, there will be terrible times in the last days. People will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boastful, proud, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy, without love, unforgiving, slanderous, without self-control, brutal, not lovers of the good, treacherous, rash, conceited, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God. Worshiping yourself and seeking the truth within yourself is not the way to go, ladies and gentlemen. The next thing is that the truth is not, another lie is that the truth is subjective. What's right for you, it may not be right for me. And how many have heard this term a lot lately? Oh, well, this is my truth. It's like, there's not your truth. There's not my truth. There is the truth. There may be my observations, my feelings, or my thoughts, but there's not my truth. There's only truth. So be careful when you start hearing things like that. Another thing that the world wants you to believe is that they want you to believe that the truth is complicated. And what I'll caution you at with this is there's things to look out for. The truth is actually very simple when you examine truth within the context of Jesus. And there's a lot of people out there in the world today that want to conflate things, complicate things. And when you start to hear, especially about some of the big topics of the day, you know, when people start talking about some of these difficult topics like abortion or transgender issues and things like that, there's a lot of weird language that you start to hear, or confusion that gets painted out there. When you start to hear things like, be on the lookout for tweaks of the language. When people start to talk about men who menstruate, it should probably throw up a red flag that we're conflating a little bit here. We're overcomplicating issues. And we have to be very careful about that. When they start to break down, when we start to talk about the abortion issue and things of that nature, and they start to like, well, you know, technically when this is this and scientifically speaking, blah, 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 we're starting to divide that too much, because God is really, really clear. I don't know how many times in the Old Testament he talks about how he abhors the Philistines and the others that were sacrificing their children to the god of Molech. So we need to be real cautious and careful with the truth. And I need to be real cautious and careful here as well, gentlemen, because the truth is also not political. This is a teaching that is not on judgment. I'm not judging anybody. I'm not casting judgment. I'm just here to talk about the truth and to talk the truth of Jesus. This is not a teaching about politics. I don't care so much what your politics are, especially when I'm standing here. If you want to go get breakfast and we want to talk about politics, we can talk about politics and things like that. That's not what this is about. I will speak the truth boldly because Jesus is the truth. And as I understand the truth through Jesus, I will do that. But I cannot judge. I am not the judge. That is Jesus' job. A bigger part of the truth to understand within the context of these difficult issues like abortion, transgender, and the myriad of other things that dominate the social construct right now, is the big part of the truth is, first part one, hey, bottom line, this is wrong. The second part of the truth that we need to completely understand, that's just as true, if not more so than the first part, is that redemption is available to those people. Redemption, if we're talking about abortion, there is redemption for those mothers. There's redemption for those fathers. There's redemption for those doctors that perform those surgeries. There's redemption available to those advocates that are out there advocating that those mothers give up their children. If they choose to seek it, that redemption is there. And we need to focus on that part of the truth as much as we focus on casting aspersions and pointing our fingers out and calling out the truth. Are you with me, gentlemen? You know, Romans 5:8, it says, while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. It says we, not they, we, you and me, the men in this room, while we were still sinners. A couple verses later, it talks about how when we were enemies of God, ladies and gentlemen, I was an enemy of God because I wasn't walking in his will. So we need to be very careful when we talk about these social issues, that we're just not pointing our fingers outward, but we're talking about the redemption that's available to those folks as well. Are you with me? All right. Thank you. Thank you. You know, as we start talking about the truth too, and we talk about people with agendas and folks that are conflating and confusing, making issues overly confused, there's one guy in the Bible that I absolutely love. And I didn't put this passage up here because it's long. I'll briefly tell the story instead of just reading it right out of the Bible, but you guys know the story. In fact, on the way up to training camp a couple months ago, I was riding with Terrence, and Terrence has a great thing that he always does. He's like, hey, name a person in the Old Testament and the New Testament that you would want to meet when you get to heaven. And I said, the first person, probably Solomon. He's got a lot of stories. I would like to, you know, kind of listen and hear what's here. The second thing is this guy who, man, I admire. I don't even know his name, and I don't think his name is in the Bible. But there was a guy that Jesus healed. Jesus was walking the streets. He healed a blind man, spit in the mud, rubbed the mud on his eyes, and caused a big ruckus when he healed this guy. The Pharisees bring this guy in, and they're like, hey, tell us about this guy that healed you. He's like, you know, it was Jesus. Here's this. They brought in his parents, and his parents were like, they were grilling his parents on Jesus because they were looking for ways. They had an agenda. The agenda was to trap Jesus, to get at Jesus, to call Jesus out. And even the parents. Now think about this. This is the equivalent of you being called in front of the Supreme Court. Only your sentence was potentially death because they had the authority. The Sanhedrin had the authority to have you stoned for blasphemy. And the parents are like, man, I don't know. You better talk to the kid again. And the kid stands up. They bring him back in. And he says, here's the truth. You want me to talk about this guy? Here's what I know. I was blind, but now I see. And that's where he left it. The truth was not complicated. The truth wasn't something you really needed to wrap your mind around. The folks with the agenda wanted to make that complicated. And here's what makes this guy a total spiritual badass, I'll say, because he deserves it, is he says, I love this part. He said, and I'm gonna read it. He said, I've told you already, and you did not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you want to be his disciples too? That's what he threw at those guys, man. I love that dude, and I cannot wait to meet him because I hope I have the guts to take a stand like that if the time ever comes. All right. So as we start talking through those particular lies, talk about the lies of the world, we can take it to Romans 12:2. Do not conform to the pattern of this world. but be transformed by the renewing of your mind as you spend time in relationship with Jesus. Then you'll be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. Gentlemen, you don't have to be confused. The more time you spend with Jesus, the more you conform your mind and your will to his, the clearer that picture will become. Are you with me? All right. Now we're going to move on from the lies of the world to the lies we tell ourselves. Who tells you more lies? Your employer? Your kids? They tell you a lot. Your wife? The government? No. I mean, yeah. But who tells you more? Yourself. How many times a day do I look in the mirror? I don't look in the mirror all the time. Don't take that. If you look like this, you wouldn't look in the mirror much either. So, but and just tell myself the wrong things. I lie to myself. There are a couple different lies that we're going to talk about here today. Can we back one up? All right. Lies that are rooted in pride. We do not dare classify or compare ourselves with some who commend themselves. When they measure themselves by themselves and compare themselves with themselves, they are not wise, is what Paul says. To me, this has social media and Facebook and Instagram and everything just wrapped right all up in it. Is when we start to compare and we start to look and then people are like, oh, well, here's me and look at this, look at me. These lies that are rooted in pride, we need to be careful of. We need to understand that that is not wise. Another thing, kind of the other end of the spectrum, are lies rooted in worthlessness. If you're telling yourself in number one that you're too good, number two, if you're telling yourself that you're too bad, I'm worthless. This is what we talked about a little bit earlier in Romans where Paul said, God demonstrates his love, for in this, while we were still sinners, he was willing to pay the ultimate price for us. There are also lies that are rooted in compromise and surrender to the wrong things. In Galatians, Paul talks about the acts of the flesh that are obvious. I'm not going to go through the entire list, but it's all a list of crap. And there's a lot of things that we can lie to ourselves and compromise to and tell ourselves and justify in pursuit of these things that we need to be very, very careful of, that has nothing to do with our relationship with Jesus. And we need to keep that first and foremost. The other piece is lies about our own righteousness. And when I say we, especially when we get to something like this, I need to start talking about me. Because there's a lot of times where I start thinking about, I'll see what's going on in the world and I'll get all fired up and I'll get angry and I'll tell God, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not playing the game. I'm not going to let these people get away with this. You know that's not true. I know that's not true. I know that's not your will. And I'm going to blast them. Next time that comes up, I'm going to blast them. And I'll tell God, I'll be like, even you, when you were down here, you crafted that whip, you went into the temple and you started flipping them tables. Like, I'm going to start being a table flipper, God. Every time something comes up, I'm going to flip those tables and I'm going to get mad. I'm going to drive people out. And God it was a really interesting kind of conversation back and forth that we had. He said, yeah, I did that. But he said, I didn't do it every day. It's like out of Jesus' 3-year ministry, there was one day, probably 5 minutes, that he went in there and flipped a bunch of tables and drove everybody out. But what was he telling everybody the other 3 years of his ministry? Hey, man, I've got something for you. I love you. I care for you. Come to me in your brokenness, and you will find the truth here with me. That's what I need to preach. I don't need to be flipping tables all the time. There comes a time to stand for the truth, gentlemen, but be careful that in your own self-righteousness, in my own self-righteousness, that I don't think that it's my job to go out there and start flipping tables. Amen. All right. The next group of lies that we're going to talk about are lies of the enemy. How many of you know that we have an enemy out there? Yes, sir. And he's out to get you. It says that he goes around like a roaring lion seeking whom he may devour. One of the tools that he uses is deception. We know this. You belong to your father, the devil, and you want to carry out your father's desires. He was a murderer. When we talk about the father, he's talking about the devil, not the father. You see, that's not capitalized. He was a murderer from the beginning, not holding to the truth, for there is no truth in him. When he lies, he speaks his native language, for he is a liar and the father of lies. And gentlemen, he's lying to you, and you better make sure that you understand his lies from the truth. And the more time that you spend with Jesus, honestly pursuing Jesus, and we're going to talk about some things here in a minute, the better off you're going to be and be able to combat these lies and these deceptions. The next thing that he comes at us with, and I'm big, this is a big one for me, is distraction. Man, I get so distracted in the morning. There's so many choices that we have now in the world. Choices aren't bad, but if choices become your idol, then we got a problem. You know, I can go now into, I can pick up this little thing right here, and I can shop for anything that I want from anywhere in the world, anything. And I can have that delivered right to my door, on top of access to all other kinds of things that come from this particular, come from distraction. When we talk about entertainment, I can sit there, I can pull up my TV. I have probably 30 different access applications for entertainment that comes available to me. Now I can sit down and read my Bible for 10 minutes, or I can spend the next 3 hours watching Married Blind or Love at First Sight, or whatever those shows are, you know, or something about, you know, true crime shows that where there's all kinds of crazy stuff happening. I can get distracted with troubles in the world. Like I said before, I can stand here and I can point my fingers at all the things wrong with the world, all the things that are going on, and the things that that I can call out. But here's the thing that we need to be really, really concerned about, gentlemen, is when we start looking at the troubles within the world, what we really need to look at is the battle that goes on in here. We need to fight this battle first. One of the things that we get distracted by is everything that's going on out there, because the devil would love for you to think, oh my gosh, look at all this crap that you better go out there and fix. Why don't you go out there and start flipping some tables, bro? And when really my focus needs to be internal. I need to focus on the battle that's in here. And how do we do that? We talked a little bit about the logos earlier. And when the devil comes at you, gentlemen, we've got to do some work. We've got to put some work in. AG taught on the armor of God a couple weeks ago. This is a snippet from that, when it says, in addition to all this, take up the shield of faith with which you can extinguish all the flaming arrows of the evil one. Take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word. Now, we talked about the word logos earlier. The Greek word here, the Greek word for word is rhema of God. And what that rhema is that's the word that is embedded in your heart and spoken word, your nature, what's in your heart. So if you say that, I love the R-H-E-M-A. I love that spelling, because when you say rhema, you can almost growl it. You can say rhema. It's the rhema of God when that comes at you. So a lot of you, and me included, when the devil comes at you, it says, submit yourselves then to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. And when we talk about resisting the devil, here's what we do a lot of, is we say, all right, devil, I've got my sword of the Spirit here. I've got it. Come at me. What you got? And he says, hey man, God's disappointed in you. You know that he's kind of bummed out. We know that you go out there and you're going to fail. And we're shaking this Bible. We're shaking the Bible at him. This is my sword. This is not the sword, gentlemen. This is some pieces of paper. Pieces of paper that have some great words on them. But this word, or even better, is this one. We're like, hold on, devil, I'm going to get you. Hold on, let me get my facial recognition, okay? Now we got, weather and news, politics, guitars. Okay, here's the Bible app. Okay, man, I'm coming at you, devil, with my Bible app. The devil is not scared of that. What the devil doesn't want is that rhema, that word that's in your heart. So long before Bobby Ufer ever stepped foot in practice, the decision was made that a core tenet of this group of men was going to be memorizing scripture. And man, is that incredible. That was probably you, Bobby. You going to take credit? Okay, all right. He says he's not taking credit for nothing, but he should. But that's humility in action, I suppose. But that decision was made that, hey, he's told the story before. He got sick and tired of being at Bible group, men's group, couples groups, and the men's are like, let's talk about sports, let's have a piece of pie, and let's go home. So he's like, I'm going to start a group. We talked last week about how God gives us the desires of your heart. God put the desire of your heart in Bobby Bandera to put together a group of men that we're going to meet early in the morning, and we're going to memorize scripture. So when the devil comes at you and says, hey, man, God's pretty bummed out with you. We both know you're going to fail. So why don't you just give in? You should give in. And you can say, actually, God says that I'm to do my best to present myself to God as a worker. And I've got no right to be ashamed because I rightly handle the word of truth. And the devil's like, whoa, where'd that come from, bro? You got to handle it like Jesus did. When Jesus was tempted, Jesus fasted for 40 days. Shoot, Chris talked about Joey Chestnut earlier. I wanted to train with some donuts earlier. Jesus fasted for 40 days and then goes out there and the devil says, how about you? We both know that you're all powerful. Why don't you turn these rocks into loaves of bread? Dude, I love me some bread. And Jesus says, no. What did he say? It is written. Man shall not live on bread alone. Devil takes him up to the highest peak of the temple, says, why don't you jump off? We know that you're special. You got it going on. God's not going to let anything happen to you. Those angels are going to be there. What was his response? It is written. Do not test the Lord your God. Then the third one, devil says, hey man, I can give you all this that's in the world. I can give you the whole thing. Why? Because Adam gave it to me. I can give you this whole thing. All you got to do is worship me. And Jesus said, it is written that you should worship the Lord your God and him alone. So next time the devil comes at you and he says, hey man, you should give in. Just give in right now. What are you going to tell him? It is written. Not here. It is here. But where it really needs to be is right here. You go after the devil with that rhema. So when we talk about resisting the devil, that's what resisting the devil means, gentlemen. And let's talk about this. A lot of you, me included, we treat this resisting the devil like it's an exhibition match. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. What I say is not just this written word that's here on paper, but I'm saying you need to transfer this word that's in here and put it here. Go from logos, this is truth, but we need to take that logos and put it here and make it what? Rhema. That's right. That's right. So if we can go here, Jesus, who's way smarter than me, and you all know this, he said to love the God with all your soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. That is the law. Upon that hangs the law and all the prophets. Now me, I get that. That's true. Absolutely. But in my shallow thinking, I think you can take Rocky 1, Rocky 2, Rocky 3, Rocky 4, you can skip 5, and Rocky 6. And all the law and all the prophets can hang on those movies. So a lot of us, when we go into this resisting the devil, we treat this like an exhibition match. And you may all remember this from Rocky 3. Do you remember this scene where Rocky goes in? Rocky is the world champ. Spoiler alert, Rocky 2, dude, it's been out for like 35 years. So if you haven't seen it, that's on you. Rocky beats Apollo Creed in Rocky 2, and he becomes a champion. In Rocky 3, he starts fighting a bunch of chumps to keep his championship. And he's doing all this marketing stuff, and he's getting soft. And he goes in and he does an exhibition match with Thunder Lips. Hulk Hogan there is Thunder Lips in that movie. And so he goes in, it's an exhibition match. And there he goes and he starts dancing around with Thunder Lips. And he's like, hey man, it's an exhibition thing. It's for a nonprofit or a charity. We just need to put on a good show and make it look like a good fight. And Thunder Lips says, okay, that's cool. And then the ding ding, the match starts, and Thunder Lips starts going crazy. Thunder Lips starts grabbing Rocky and taking this stuff seriously. And then eventually Rocky gets with the program and he starts choking out Thunder Lips. So what I'm saying, gentlemen, is this: when the devil comes after you and it's Thunder Lips, you got to be careful. You can't treat it like an exhibition match. You can't go in and say, hey man, we just need to put on a good show. I just need to make it look good to these people out here. And then I'll go ahead and I'll click there, or I'll do this, or I'll do that. No, don't put on a good show, gentlemen. It's not about the show. It's about choking the enemy out with that rhema. All right. So we talked about the lies of the world. Now we're going to talk about the truth. We're going to talk about the truth of Jesus. Jesus is the one thing in which you can place all your trust. Now, we go into a lot of things. I can trust this. I can trust that. I can trust this person. I can put all my trust in this preacher. I can put all my trust in that politician. I can put all my trust. Gentlemen, do not put your trust in any man. Do not put your trust in any woman. You can align, you can agree, you can do all those things, but man, do not give your heart, do not give full trust to any human being. Jesus is the only one that you can trust. And Deuteronomy, be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or terrified because of them, for the Lord your God goes with you. You can trust him because he will never leave you and he will never forsake you. Thus, high priest, talking about Jesus here, truly meets our need. One who is holy, blameless, pure, set apart from sinners, exalted in the heavens. Unlike the other high priests, he does not need to offer sacrifices day after day for his own sins and then for the sins of the people, because he sacrificed for their sins once and for all when he sacrificed himself. How many times, gentlemen, does the world love it when they see a Christian fall? And they can point and say, ha, this is a guy that you align yourself with. This is somebody that claims to be a follower of Christ, claims to be perfect, and he fell. That means what you believe is crap. That's what they want us to say, what they want us to think. We know that we don't place our trust in any man. And if a preacher falls, God bless him, and he's got redemption available for him. But we can't put our 100% in any faith in any preacher, any politician, any other man. Our faith belongs to Jesus, the one, right? Am I right, gentlemen? Number 2, the truth can hurt. You are loved so much that Jesus won't let you stay where you are. So that can hurt. It can hurt to get jostled. This particular passage in the Bible, I love when Jesus meets the woman at the well. Holy cow, time is flying. But he meets the woman at the well, and he says, hey, get me some water. I can give you living water. And after sitting with her for a while, he's like, hey, why don't you go get your husband? And she says, hey, man, I don't have a husband. And Jesus doesn't play along with it. He says, I know. The truth is, you've had 5. And the dude that you're shacking up with right now, he ain't your husband. So I love, for those of you that know my story, I love that in this particular passage, it's 5 marriages that she had, because man, it means I'm still good. I'm under the bar. But so, and part of me is like, man, Jesus, you got that girl between the eyes there at the well. It's like, I know you've had 5 and this. But what happens from that? Jesus' ministry flourishes in that region because she's like, you got to hear this guy. He knows it all. And Jesus' ministry flourished. So gentlemen, don't be afraid of the truth hurting as Jesus grows you. One of the things we need to be careful of, I touched on this a little bit earlier, is we need to be careful to use the truth as a net to capture, not a sword to slay. Justice is God's job, not yours. We talked a little bit about that in the redemption that's available to everyone, even those that we want to see justice fall on. Justice justice is part of God's nature. Justice is going to happen, but so is redemption. And so is forgiveness, and so is grace. And thank goodness, because man, do I need a healthy portion of all that stuff. There's only one lawgiver and one judge, one who's able to save and destroy. But you, who are you to judge your neighbor? Question I'll leave you with here, gentlemen, is, do you believe that Jesus is the truth? Bobby believes that Jesus is the truth, I guess. I think I just heard him. Do you believe that Jesus is the truth? Do you believe that Jesus is the truth? Then are you living like that? Are you living like Jesus is the truth, even when that means sacrifice? When that means doing the thing that you don't want to do, or not doing the thing that you want to do? Do you believe that Jesus is the truth? I'm going to leave you with that question, gentlemen. Thank you very much for your time, and we've got some discussion questions today.